Today in episode 25 of the podcast, we're going to be talking about Blumhouse announcing 4 new horror sequels all coming out in 2025. And get ready to use the Schwartz again. The search for more money is on. We'll also break down the 4th episode of The Acolyte and review the film The Bikeriders. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn.
Start off the episode this week by unfortunately announcing the passing of actor Donald Sutherland. Donald Sutherland was in just so many things over the years. He was in MASH, he was in The Hunger Games. Obviously, he's probably more famous in modern times for being Kiefer Sutherland's dad, but it is unfortunate to announce his passing. He was 88 years old, but man, that guy was in so many things over the years.
Yeah, like over 200 different films.
Incredible.
I mean, of course, the meme is out there from Invasion of the Body Snatchers where he's kind of screaming and pointing. But, yeah, there's just so many different things. Like I say, a lot of people probably know him from The Hunger Games. But, yeah, with being big fans of 24 and of Kiefer Sutherland, yeah, we know him well through that. But, yeah, we just offer our condolences out to his family. Just sad to see him gone at 88.
Yeah, what a life though, man. Like you said, over 200 films, 88. That's a long life lived, man. But just an absolute legend of the screen. So it's unfortunate, like you said. Our thoughts go out to him and his family.
To move on to our first news story of the day. So we're talking Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So this is an animated series that's coming to Disney+. We now know it's coming in November. So this is it's part of the MCU, but not. It's one of those, it's kind of showing a younger Spider-Man. So it's supposed to somewhat be Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but a little bit younger. But he won't be voicing. We have Hudson Thames will be voicing the younger Peter Parker. And we did get some kind of confirmation that Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio will be, Daredevil and Kingpin within the series. So it's nice to see, those guys coming to voice their, live action characters now playing an animated version.
I'm excited for that too because, we're obviously big Spider-Man fans as well, but, I've made no, hidden knowledge of the fact that I love Daredevil as much as I do, particularly Charlie Cox's take on it. And the fact that he's coming back to do, his animated version of himself is awesome. I love that continuity. It's I know we've talked a lot about DC making that play also as well, but the fact that they're signed on to do it, I love it. And the fact that it's coming this year. I know there was some up in the air about when that series was coming, but I do like the fact that it's coming this year so we don't have to wait a super long time for it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it because it's changed names and it's been a couple years since we've really had any solid information about it. So it's nice to at least get a little bit of an update on it.
Yeah, Tom Holland's going to be pretty busy moving forward, which kind of leads me to the next story that we're talking about. Sony has announced that Uncharted 2 is in development and is underway. So Uncharted wound up being a little bit of a sleeper hit for Sony. Like, I know they've been a little hit or miss with their films, but I really enjoyed the first Uncharted with, Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland, and I'm pretty sure both are coming back to be in the movie at this point.
Yeah, I think Mark made a comment about it not too long ago that he's got the script and that they're looking it over. But, yeah, Sony finally given the green light that it's going to move forward. Yeah, a lot of people who are fans of the games, which it's one of the best game series I've ever played, just visually, storyline, and everything. And so, a lot of people were a little mixed that you're going to tell the young Drake story instead of, kind of going where the story was. But I thought Tom did a pretty solid job. I know he had some, to his own admission, had a few issues with how he portrayed. So we'll see how he, mixes it up a little bit for coming back for Uncharted 2 and see what kind of story they tell.
Yeah, I can see him trying to mature it up a little bit too as he's getting a little, I don't want to say older, but he is getting older, but you know what I mean? He's not old by any stretch of the imagination. So it's still kind of a younger Nathan Drake tale. But yeah, like you said, those games are absolutely amazing. They're among my favorite as well. And this is one of the more, I feel, successful video game adaptations into a film that they've done. And I'm very excited that it's getting a sequel because there's so much cool story and so many different things from the games that they can pull from that I think they got a lot of meat to work with as far as giving us a good story.
Yeah, absolutely, because we don't know. Maybe now they'll go into more of one of the games, maybe the first game, and they'll tell that story, or if they'll still kind of keep it as a younger in-between story. We really don't know, but I'm looking forward to it. I had fun with the first one. It's still kind of hard to see Mark in the role of Sully, but I thought he did a solid job. But we're used to Sully being a little bit different than how Mark portrayed him. But it was still fun, and we did get that kind of at the very end. We got him sporting the stash and everything. So yeah, it'll be fun to see exactly what kind of story they tell and how they go forward with this. But yeah, it was a hit for Sony, so it makes a lot of sense that they are going to be going back to it.
I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yep. And talking about another sequel, so before Nintendo's latest Direct, they announced that the Super Mario Brothers movie sequel will be coming out in April of 2026. So talking about a mega hit like Absolutely. That, I think outperformed everything that anybody thought that movie was going to do, especially after, again, little controversy. Everyone was like, Chris Pratt's going to be Mario, but I thought he did a solid job in the whole film. Like I've rewatched with my kids a ton. Like it was a big summer blockbuster, fun animated movie, and I'm looking forward to the sequel.
Yeah, I mean that outside of Barbie and Oppenheimer last year, that was the highest grossing film. It was right in there in the mix as well, and it legitimately took me like 2 to 3 weeks to get that Peaches song out of my head on repeat over and over again.
Now it's back in our heads.
Back in again. It's such a catchy song. I hate how catchy it is, but I'm excited for that because they did kind of tease where they were going with the next one, with potentially introducing additional Mario characters into the story. Obviously, if you've seen it by now, I'm not spoiling anything by saying, they teased the involvement of Yoshi at this point. So where they move forward with the story, it's exciting because, it was such a big hit, but Mario's got such a big, vast history to pull from that you can really kind of take some creative liberties and make some fun things happen that I'm excited for them because, like you said, it blew everybody's expectations away multiple times over. Like, I think they thought it would do well, but I don't think they thought it would do $1 billion at the box office well, and it absolutely did. So you'd be crazy not to at least try to go back to that well to see what you can do.
Yeah, I think in the end it was the most profitable film of the year.
Easily.
So, yeah, and we even had Chris Pratt talk about how this sequel is kind of going to set up the NCU, the Nintendo Cinematic Universe. So do we potentially see some non-Mario Nintendo characters kind of show up? Do we get Samus? Do we get, nods to the vast library of Nintendo characters that they have? Potentially going to have that. So maybe it's doing a multiverse through the pipes, that he can go through a pipe and he ends up in another game. And it could be a lot of fun if we get some nods to other games. But yeah, it made so much money. It did so well, and it was a good film overall, so I'm looking forward to diving back into Mario in 2026.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like we're not going to have too long of a wait, like you said. Less than 2 years. I know with these animated films, they tend to space them out a little bit more because there is so much that goes into animating and making these films look as beautiful as they do. So I'm very much looking forward to that when it comes out for sure as well. I wanted to pivot a little bit away from sequels and go towards a new project that was announced by Sony. So they've tabbed Will Smith to do a sci-fi film called Resistor. There's some details that have been floated out about it by now, but it's kind of excited to see kind of Sony diving into a newer type film that isn't a sequel or anything that we've talked about lately.
Yeah, Bad Boys is Ride or Die is doing really well in theaters, but we weren't sure after, of course, the whole controversy with Will Smith and everything, how... he would be doing now, but we've already got this with, we got Bad Boys Ride or Die. We've got this movie announced. He's talking about the I Am Legend sequel as well. Sure. So it doesn't seem like that really slowed down his star power at all. But yeah, to see him return to sci-fi, it'd hopefully be fun. But, the premise was something about gravity. There's a device that can, manipulate or change gravity. So it's definitely an odd or out there sci-fi tale, but we'll see how they pull it off.
Yeah, anytime Will Smith goes into the science fiction realm, it tends to be a mixed bag because he's had, big hits obviously with like Independence Day, but then you also have like Wild Wild West, which a lot of people panned, or even like Hancock, which was kind of hit or miss a little bit, dealing with like the superhero type stuff that he tried to do as well. But like you said, it was a big risk putting Will Smith back out there again because of the controversy. There were, a lot of discourse online that, people were like, well, I can't support Will Smith anymore, or various things like that. But like you said, Bad Boys did really well. So I think that it shows that, despite some of the controversy, that people are still willing to come out and see movies that he's in. So I'm interested to see what this film is based on the premise you talked about. It it could be really good, it could not. But like you said, that's the mixed bag that you get with a Will Smith science fiction film. So let's see how that goes for him.
Yeah, because I'm blanking on the one that he did with his son. That was definitely the sci-fi film that was very heavily panned. I can't remember the name of it right now.
I pushed it out of my memory for a reason.
I think most people did. But yeah, it can be very hit or miss because, Independence Day was just
After Earth, maybe?
Might have been, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Independence Day was one of the biggest movies of all time that really kicked off his star power. Like you were expecting at that time when Will Smith did a movie, it was the summer blockbuster movie. So we'll see if Bad Boys is kind of helping him return to that or not. And they're already talking about doing another Bad Boys movie after the way this one is already performing. So yeah, Will Smith is continuing on there.
Seems like he might be back.
Yep. Now, one I didn't expect to be coming back. I was kind of surprised by this news. So Mel Gibson I think he was at a con or he was doing a talk, and he talked about, I'll be directing Lethal Weapon 5. And okay, that was a series that we kind of thought was well over with. I mean, it's been 30 years or so since the last one. Or
they were too old for this like 30 years ago. So, I mean, the running joke, obviously. But, that kind of came out of left field, too, because, I mean, you talk about all these sequels, like, do we need a fifth Lethal Weapon film at this point? But, Mel Gibson's kind of doing what Mel Gibson does, right? But it sounds like he's got something viable that he's working on. So I really loved the first two Lethal Weapon films. 3 and 4. I didn't really care for 4 either, but it seems like he's going back to the well. So let's see what they do with it.
And he says he's going to direct it.
Yeah.
They have a partial script that was written by Richard Donner before he passed, so they're utilizing that to build off of to finalize the script. So it'll be kind of the last work of Richard Donner as well that's brought to life. So we'll see how it turns out. But yeah, it's been a very long time, and Mel Gibson is also one that's not too shy from controversy as well. So
yeah, and he's not the box office draw he used to be either. Like he's had a kind of a mixed bag of success, but he's not without his controversy either. Sometimes they say that controversy creates cash, but we'll see if that's the case with this because I don't really recall anybody clamoring for another Lethal Weapon film. So the fact that he's trying to do it, I get trying to honor Richard Donner's memory. So they can make it. Whether or not it's going to be any good, I guess, is to be determined, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of sequels that might be 30 years past when anybody asked for it, Amazon has come out and announced that they're making Spaceballs 2, which is crazy considering that I'd never expected that to be a thing that we talk about in 2024. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I honestly thought that was something we would have got during the prequel era, that they would have come back to that when George Lucas revisited Star Wars after that time. But yeah, it's 2024, and we got Spaceballs 2. It's got to be titled The Search for More Money. If they don't use that title that was mentioned in the original film, something's wrong there. But yeah, it's really interesting that they've decided now. I mean, Mel Brooks is going to be a producer, so it's great that got him aboard for it. But as most of Mel Brooks' movies, do they work outside of that era that they did? And Spaceballs was one that I still absolutely love. Do we potentially get Rick Moranis to come back as Darth Helmet, or do we just get a Kylo Ren type of situation? So we've got a new bad guy, but we've got a burnt and scarred giant helmet that he's looking at and trying to hold on to the scarred, we don't really know what they're going to do with the story. We know Josh Gad has co-written it. He's going to star and produce in it. And the only thing that I see Josh Gad doing, he's got to be Barf's son. Of course, the late, great John Candy. We can't replace him. So if you could put Josh as, call him Puke or Ralph or something like that, and being Barf's son, that's where I really see him fitting in. And that would be fun. Yeah. He would fit that role really well.
I think he would take good care of this. Like I said, it's one of those. It's another one of those things that just kind of came out of left field. Like I had no idea anybody was even thinking about working on something like this. But I mean, it could be fun. I like a good, fun, silly sci-fi movie that, there's a lot of things they could parody now. Like since the last one's been out, so especially in the Star Wars universe, you know what I mean. That they tend to poke a lot of fun at. But yeah, I'm kind of at a loss, man. I want to see more about this, like as it gets closer to coming out. Maybe see a trailer, see what the aesthetic of the film is going to be, see what the tone of the film is going to be. Just before I really pass too much judgment. But yeah, that was definitely one I wasn't expecting to hear about.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because we have no idea what they're doing with. Are they going to parody the prequels? Are they going to parody the sequels? Are they just going to try to continue on the first movie and, like I said, have like Barf's son or have like Lone Star's son or something? I would throw Glenn Powell out there if they were doing another Lone Star type of character. He would fit that so well. But yeah, we don't know if it's going to be like a direct sequel. They're just going to parody doing one of the others, and we're going to have a whole new cast and whole new crew. But I mean, if we don't have an oversized helmet, they've done something wrong.
You have to. You have to at this point.
Kind of moving on, we got Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are teaming up again for a new crime thriller, Rip. It's written and directed by Joe Carnahan, and we don't have a whole lot of more information on that, but it's proven you get Matt Damon and Ben Affleck in a movie together, whether they're writing it or they're starring it together, and you've got a pretty solid hit, because I really enjoyed what they did with Air and doing that movie together. I think that was the last one that they did together. Of course, Good Will Hunting was what skyrocketed them and everything, but they're always fun to watch when they get on screen together.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one too. It's like you said, it's a crime thriller, so it's kind of a, you know, Ben Affleck loves to do those types of crime thriller, hostage heist type films. So it feels like it's going to be right in their wheelhouse. But like you said, they do tend to create like a lot of magic when they work together. So I'm excited about the possibilities for this. It feels like a new story that they're leaning into. I'm always excited for new original ideas or takes on genres that we've already seen. But it, like, when they do get together, magic does happen. So I'm excited that they're continuing to do that. I know, you know, personal things for them aside, I know Ben's going through more personal stuff, you know, but the fact that they're coming together again to make this, I'm excited for it.
Oh yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Matt Damon's. The Bourne series is one of my favorite action series. Like, that was something I was surprising to see him do back in the day, because you didn't really see him as an action star, and he just nailed it. And The Martian is also another favorite of mine that Matt Damon did. So yeah, seeing those two back together, like I said, I'll see anything with Matt Damon in it, and even with Ben Affleck in it. Like, and I'm still curious to see if any of the rumors for Deadpool and Wolverine come true. I don't want to go deep into it, but if we do, we're gonna get some nice cameos in there.
And we're counting down the days for that. We're super excited for that as well. Moving on to some horror news, Blumhouse, who, you know, if you see horror movie trailers, Blumhouse is a good 70% of them at this point. They kind of got the market cornered on like horror films right now. Them and A24 really are like the two big major, you know, horror, you know, studios at this point. But they've announced a ton of sequels like that are coming out very soon, like next year. Like, they're all in the works, and I don't know how long it takes to like make these types of films. But they announced sequels to what? Megan, Black Phone, Five Nights at Freddy's is getting a sequel, and Insidious is getting another sequel. So a lot of things coming down the pipeline from Blumhouse, but it seems like we're getting a lot more continuations of stories, and all of those for the most part were hits for them. So interesting to see where they move forward with those stories.
Yeah, and just to go ahead and announce that all of them are coming out in 2025.
Next year.
It's especially horror, to see one studio releasing 4 horror movies in 1 year. Like, that's pretty big, and they seem to have had a resurgence here with everything. You know, we saw Imaginary from them. You can go back and see our review of that, but they've definitely been cranking stuff out, but the quality of it has been pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, they're, like I said, them and A24 are like the two main like horror studios, but I'm surprised they kept all of that under wraps, because that's 4 different projects that are all getting sequels that they've got to all be shooting at this point to come out next year. So the fact that they've been working on them, I don't know how plugged in we've been, but they all kind of hit at the same time, that we were like, how have they kept all of these under wraps for this long? It's good, you know, more power to them, but that was kind of a surprising announcement for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of moving on to another series that we really enjoy with the Mad Max series. We liked Furiosa a lot, but the box office just has not been very kind to it. I still think it's looking at like a $25 to $30 million loss on it, and Tom Hardy, you know, talking about the Bikeriders, mentioned that he doesn't think the next film, The Wasteland, is going to happen now, and it all seems to be tied to that box office just not being great for
Yeah, and I think it speaks to a bigger. I think it speaks to a bigger thing that we've talked about here before, where it seems like people are being more choosy about what they go and spend their money on to go see in the theaters and what they're willing to wait for to go see on streaming. I would love to see the streaming numbers for this when it does hit. I know, like those companies don't really release like specific numbers or anything, but I could imagine that film being a big hit when it makes it to Netflix or wherever it's going to be. I believe it's probably going to be on Max. I can't remember who has them at this point, who has the other films, but. It's one of those that in a different time probably would have done really well at the box office, right? But for whatever reason, it just didn't hit. And it's not for a lack of a quality film. Like you said, we watched it. We both really enjoyed it. But it seems like the audience didn't really turn out for it. And I think, like you said, it speaks to just the shift in how people consume going to the movies at this point, because we've seen with the right films hitting, they make a ton of money still, but it's like so many of these just have been underperforming lately. And I think it speaks to, we've talked about it before and I won't go into length, but like, how expensive everything is now and people are just being more choosy about how they spend their entertainment money.
Yeah, audiences are definitely being a bit more careful with what they go to. And we're seeing with Inside Out 2, it's just blowing things away with families and everybody going out to the movies for that. I think it's already approaching $500 million. It's passed. Yeah. It's already passed Dune Part 2 is the biggest domestic haul of the year, which we know. We got Deadpool and Wolverine that's already tracking for bigger than that. Sure. So we're going to see a big family movie and a big comic book movie, but past that, people have been not going out to theaters as much.
Yeah, and it's a little disappointing, right? For, obviously we love film enough to do a podcast about it, right? So, I mean, we have no problem going consistently to seeing a whole bunch of stuff, but like you said, it speaks to that shift in society now to where, like they're so selective with what they do. You never know really when a movie's going to hit sometimes. Like you there's a few that you could probably bank on, like anytime Disney or Pixar puts out a film, it's probably going to do pretty well. And then, you still have the occasional tentpole superhero film that'll do really well depending on the story. Like obviously Deadpool and Wolverine is going to be by far and away the biggest film of the year, I think, box office wise, but it goes to show that some of these other projects, it's really a crapshoot as far as what's going to be a hit or not. Like, is it enough to put a well-known actor into these films to make it a success at this point? We just don't know, because we've seen other cases where you look at it like from a 50,000 foot view of it, and you're like, oh, that movie's going to make a killing at the box office. Mad Max has been popular for years, and it just didn't for whatever reason. And it's not for a lack of star power. I mean, you got Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth are two, a lot of people consider A-list actors, and it just, for whatever reason, underperformed.
Yeah, you can look at Inside Out 2 being a sequel, and like, all right, it's a sequel performing, but Furiosa was a sequel, and it didn't really perform. And you got Elemental for Pixar. It took a while. It did not come out of the gate very strong at all, but after a while and at the end of its run, it did fairly well. But it's the same thing. Like, well, it's a sequel and it's Pixar, but an original Pixar didn't do that well until the end. And Furiosa's sequel, it didn't. We just really, it's kind of hard to predict what's really going to do well or not. Like, we've had several movies that, I thought If was going to have a much bigger box office than it had. We thought Furiosa was going to be a lot bigger than it was. It's kind of hard still to predict what's going to be a big hit.
Yeah, like you mentioned, If is a great example of that, because we're literally talking about the other film that he's doing this year that's going to do a ton of money in Deadpool, but you throw him in another movie like If, and it just didn't hit for whatever reason, and you thought it would. It's a wild case study in film, and it's an interesting social experiment just to see like people's thought processes into what they decide. Oh, this is what I'm going to go to the theater to see, and this is what I may wait to see on streaming. Like, I'd love to see the case of these movies that don't do as well in the theaters and how well they do once they make it to streaming. Is there a significant surge in viewership when it's just available for people to watch whenever they want?
And I think that's kind of what hurt the theaters and stuff was COVID, where everything was going to streaming so quickly, and we're still kind of seeing it today that if a movie's not performing well within a month, it's on streaming. So like, they're not really holding out to see if it does any better. And I think a lot of people have changed their mentality that, all right, it's not doing well right now. I can just wait a week or two and it'll be out on streaming and I can just watch it there instead of going to theaters.
It's a big shift for sure, and it's going to be interesting to see how that landscape changes in the next several years. Is, you know, obviously these studios still have these big projects under works, but does that take a little bit of a hit if they don't know like what's gonna do well and what's not gonna do well? You know?
It does seem like a shift it's probably going to be coming with the budgets of these films, because I think If was over $100 million for that, and well, it was a great film and a beautiful film. Did it need to be $100 million film? We've talked about it. We still haven't seen it yet. With Joker Part 2 has a bigger budget than Dune Part 2. Like, some of these budgets are kind of getting out of control when it comes to these movies. Like, where did all that money go to for these films?
Well, we can kind of jokingly point towards like a lot of these stories that we're talking about is sequels. Like they're investing in products that they have known to be successful, right? So what does that do for original content at that point? And that's another conversation you can have, and we're not going to dive too deep into that here, but that's another conversation you can have about it, right? Is like, are they going to be less apt to put that into original content, and we're just going to get sequel after sequel after sequel because that's what hits with people, you know? You never know. Like,
yeah, because you got Kevin Costner's new Western movie. He's had to put some of his own money into it. We're seeing with Francis Ford Coppola's next that Lionsgate's picked it up to distribute it, but they're not paying the marketing for it, so he's going to have to put his own money. Are we going to be seeing that a lot more, that these directors and creatives who want to get a project off the ground that's not a sequel, how much of their own money are they going to have to pour into it?
It's wild. We're going to have to keep our eyes open for like new money, and that just goes to show how important it is to support these types of movies. And I don't want to get on my soapbox about it, but if you're hearing us talk about sequels ad nauseum and kind of rolling your eyes like, oh man, another sequel, we kind of jokingly say, do we really need one? Well, these are things that the studios know will make money, and as long as it keeps doing that, like, you have to support films that aren't sequels at this point to get more of those original creative ideas to be made. And if people aren't doing it, then the studios are looking at it from a business perspective, like, why are we going to pour money into this when we could just crank out, Toy Story 24 and it's going to make a ton of money, right?
You guys even go back and look at the creator. That was an original sci-fi film that did decently, but was that enough to get them to continue throwing money at like original sci-fi films? Because if it's an action movie, sci-fi film, it's going to cost a decent amount of money to be done. But
no doubt.
On the other side, we had Godzilla -1 do so incredibly well with, a monster sci-fi, considered kind of sci-fi, $13-15 million, something like that. Like, it made a big blockbuster action movie for what's really next to nothing.
Yeah, chump change, right? A little bit of a sidebar on that. I went back and watched a dub version of that film like recently, because we watched the Japanese version with subtitles. I watched a dub version of that film, and it was so weird. So watching a dub version of the film, it didn't feel right. Just kind of wanted to sidebar on that a little bit.
Just like Shogun, it needs to be watched with the original actors in there.
Absolutely. Just kind of wanted to sidebar with that a little bit. But moving on to a film that we just reviewed, Inside Out, last week, so go back and check out what we thought of that. It appears they're going to have a spin-off series coming to Disney Plus in the spring of next year, so that's coming very quickly. Like, it seems like it's been in the works for a minute, but we're just now hearing that it's coming out at the beginning of next year.
Yeah, and it's going to be following kind of the emotions that handle Riley's dream, so kind of get a different aspect of her brain and how it's working. We don't know how much of the real world we're going to see, if we're just going to be seeing all these different dream sequences, but it sounds fun, and I know my kids can't wait to see that. But yeah, with how well Inside Out 2 is doing, it makes sense that they're trying to go in, but they would have been developing these kind of at the same time.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like they're going to dive into the subconscious mind more than just the active awake mind and how you process emotions when you're awake, but how your brain functions when it's dreaming has always kind of been a fascinating subject for me personally. But it seems like a cool take to kind of dive into that subconscious and see what's active when you sleep. So there's a lot of fun, creative things that they could do with that I'm excited to see what they do with it.
I'm already picturing that they're going to deal with the feeling of falling while you're asleep, and make a joke about that, and see how humorous they take on that. Of and waking up and now you're flat in your bed, but you feel like you just fell out of an airplane.
I like that they're taking that to the series route though, because I don't necessarily think that needs to be an entire movie, but those could make for some fun, like short episodes, or like I don't know. They didn't say specifically how long the episodes were going to be, but assuming 20 to 30-minute episodes of, something like that. There's a lot of fun stories you could tell with that. So, like I said, I hope the following one's fun. Maybe some embarrassing moment in a school or something that you may dream about or something. But that'll be fun. I'm excited to see that when it comes out.
Yeah, there's a ton of fun stuff they can do with dealing with dreams and the emotions of that, and just how silly and over the top they could be, but also doing more touching and poignant stuff too. Of,
sure.
How we deal with things in our dreams like that. So it'd be a lot of fun, but yeah, we'll look forward to that next year.
I love it.
So kind of talking about big blockbuster movies with the Avengers films, Benedict Cumberbatch kind of gave away that Avengers 5 is going to be filming next year and basically confirmed that he will be returning as Doctor Strange. He was doing an interview and talking about how much he loved, playing Doctor Strange, and said, yeah, it's going to be fun next year to get back with the Avengers and stuff. So we've got our first Avenger confirmed for Avengers 5.
Yeah, and it's still up in the air as far as what's going to bring all these characters together, because like we've talked ad nauseum in previous episodes about Marvel trying to right the ship and have more cohesive storytelling, I think, and bringing everything together. Like we said, there was that fulcrum point where everything clicked into one point, and then it kind of just spread right back out again, and they're trying to kind of corral that back together. But it's exciting to see Doctor Strange back as well, because like you said, he's another one of those perfect casting choices, I think, that they really hit the nail on the head with, as far as like I see him as Doctor Strange now, you know what I mean? Like he's really embodied that character, but it's exciting to see that he's confirmed for it. I can imagine there's going to be more of those coming shortly. Like you said, if they're getting ready to start filming it, you're going to hear about more people involved with it, because as much as Marvel likes to keep things under wrap, there's only so much they can keep under wraps. So
yeah, and we got rumors of Deadpool and Wolverine potentially showing up in it, but we kind of don't know the story they're doing. As we know, the Avengers are this cumulative films of these story points, and we were kind of building to a lot with Kang, but we now know with everything with Jonathan Majors, and they're going to be doing a shift. We don't know if we're still going towards Kang, or if we're going to just replace him and move on, or if we're going to get a new bad that pops up, because we got so much kind of in the pipeline coming with the Fantastic Four and where we're going with that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go for this Avengers film, because it felt like they knew where they were going, and now they've had this kind of reset that they have to do, and we don't really know what we're going to be looking towards with Avengers 5.
I'm hoping we get some real viable answers coming out of Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, I know it's going to be like a really fun, over the top kind of story, but I think they're intentionally holding back a lot of the plot of the film, because I think it's going to be such a pivotal point for Marvel branching out from it, that it's hopefully going to give us a better understanding of where we're going, because like you said, there's multiple Avengers movies announced that are coming, and we don't know how we're going to get there. And I'd like to see them finally start to get back towards, like, moving towards that one point again. And hopefully, this is something that they could get back to, because it's something we're all looking forward to.
As I talked about last week with Blade, that's still up in the air. We don't know when it may film, and we have Avengers filming next year. Is he going to be a part of it all? Are we going to bring him into it, or is he going to be Avengers 6, or is he just going to be outside of it? Because we still, we got a few more details that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but we just don't know what's going to happen with that. So we got some characters, and even Ironheart, we haven't seen her since Black Panther 2, and a lot of these shows, we've got one season of stuff. We got a lot of characters that we don't know if we've seen them for the last time, or if they're going to be showing up in Avengers 5 or 6, because there's been a pretty good lull in these kind of setups. I mean, we got Loki season 2.
Sure.
That set up a lot of stuff, but that was
pre-Jonathan Majors fiasco, right? And I think it's a good opportunity for us to kind of pivot towards Blade at this point, because we did get a little bit more news about it, and we've talked about this film so much because I think it speaks to how much we've been looking forward to this project in particular. But we got a little bit of extra information about the film this week, so it does feel like whatever they're going to wind up doing is going to be set in present day. So it is going to be in line with a lot of the stuff that they're doing. Mia Goth has been working on, attaching to play Lilith, I believe is the character that she's going to play. And they're finally getting to work on trying to finish the script this summer. I know Mahershala Ali's come out and said that, he's getting a little impatient with, the progress or lack thereof of the film, but it does sound like they're working on getting the script right and then maybe pivoting towards finding the right director finally, even though we've had 6 or 7 people attached to the project at this point. Yeah,
and like I mentioned in our previous episode, again, the writer who wrote the last version of Blade is working on Midnight Suns, which, 99% feature Blade.
Sure.
And we weren't sure what this, new writer was going to do, but now we find out that they're rewriting it again. So it's just, it's still seemingly a mess. It's nice to get a little more details, but it does seem like Ali is getting a little frustrated with it all. I mean, he mentioned that this was kind of his Black Panther with going to Blade, so it feels like he doesn't want to step away, but it's been 5 years since it was announced. He's done one voiceover for one movie. Like, just, I can feel that if they don't get something off the ground with it by the end of the year, that he's probably walking.
And who could blame him at this point? I mean, Jesus, it's 5 years, like you said, since he had signed on to do this film, and it still hasn't been made. Like, we jokingly call it the cursed Marvel film. It's like, it feels legitimately like that, and for whatever reason, they just can't get it right or get the right people in the right situations to make this film happen and get written and get made. And it's frustrating because, I know a lot of people are looking forward to it like we are, but, I mean, there does seem to be a little glimmer of hope, but it seems to be fading more and more as the days go by. But it seems like they may be making a concerted effort to get it done and get it right, so where they can start finally making this film. Because losing an actor like Mahershala Ali is not an insignificant loss for them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people chomping at the bit to see him play this character, and if he winds up walking, that's a big hit for Marvel.
Yeah, and hopefully with Deadpool and Wolverine showing what a rated R comic book movie could do, that we get a rated R Blade movie and we get, a solid movie out of it. But it's hard to see a project take this long, have so many different directors, so many different writers come out and be good. Like, it feels like at this point they just need to stop, reset, build it back up from the ground up, and go from there instead of... we're on our 6th or 7th writer. Yeah. We're on at least our 3rd director that's going to be coming up. Like, there needs something that gets this going and keep the quality up. And I think it needs to be a bigger priority for Marvel. It doesn't seem like it's a very big priority, so they're just kind of just pushing it away. But as I mentioned before, Blade was a very significant film with Wesley Snipes that really helped Marvel and saved Marvel with what it did, and to have the character now with the MCU not seemingly get the right kind of care is kind of disheartening.
A little bit, yeah, but I'm still, I don't know, maybe it's the optimist in me, but I still think that they're going to eventually get this right and this movie will get made, and I really hope that it becomes a big hit for them because I like, the fun, campy, I don't want to call them campy necessarily because the stories haven't been, not all of them anyway, but, with the superhero films, I like kind of that darker, grittier type character, and those are some real fun stories. Like, I love how well they've done with, like, the Punisher, so to say, which is a darker character, and, working into things like that. And I even really enjoyed Moon Knight for what it was, and, hopefully that, those characters wind up being in the Midnight Suns film, which I'm hoping they will be, but really hope they see Blade across the finish line, because I think it has the potential to be something special for them if they can get it, on the right track.
Yeah, they're doing a Midnight Suns film, so there's something in that darker character universe that they're liking, but just, I hope we don't have the same type of issue as well with the Midnight Suns film movie, and it takes 6 or 7 years before we get that done, because, and again, we just don't know how Blade or some of these characters with the Midnight Suns would play into the Avengers and going forward, and even kind of with Daredevil coming out, because originally, they weren't going to tie it to the Netflix series. They were kind of bringing it into the MCU on their own, and then there was a lot of backlash, and they rebooted and restarted that series, and now it's very heavily tied to the Netflix series. But, we've already seen Matt Murdock in the MCU. Like, there's definitely still a lot of shifting and changing that's going on within Marvel.
Yeah, it seems like they're at least trying to make an effort to figure it out and right the ship, but this is one we're hopefully going to see across the finish line eventually.
Yeah. And kind of finishing off with Marvel here, we have screenwriter Michael Leslie, who's working on the MCU X-Men film. We've got a few details on his first pitch to Marvel about his X-Men script, and it seems like he pitched to them the entire roster of X-Men 97. So we're talking Wolverine and Cyclops, Jean Grey, Jubilee, Gambit, Rogue, Beast, Magneto, and Professor X. Like, yes, please. Like, because that's what we grew up on. I mean, if you want to see what we thought of X-Men 97, go back in our archives to see that. But that's what got me into comics. So that was the roster that got me into the X-Men, was the 90s X-Men of the X-Men 97 roster. So to get them on the big screen, because we kind of partially got that. But, you know, as I've said before, Anna Paquin, I enjoy her as an actress. They did not do a proper Rogue. Sure. We still haven't got a proper Gambit in live action. Like, give me the proper Rogue and Gambit in live action.
Yeah, and it seems like that X-Men, now that Marvel's really got their hands on it again, at least from a film perspective, I'm more confident. Like, we jokingly talk about them not knowing what they're doing with Blade necessarily. I'm significantly more confident in them getting their hands on the X-Men, because it is such an important piece of Marvel, right? So we talk about, like, the Fantastic Four and X-Men are two huge pillars in Marvel Comics that I think now that they finally got the opportunity to do right by them in a film sense, that it's going to work. And like you said, give me that entire roster from X-Men 97. We absolutely love the show. We love the original animated series as well. But if you give us proper versions of all these characters in a film, I am so ready for it. I will, like we jokingly say, we're going to see Deadpool and Wolverine like 6 times. I'll see the X-Men 6 or 7 times if it's done right.
Yeah, and I think you're also seeing with Deadpool and Wolverine that fans are clamoring, like, give us the comic book suits. Like,
yes.
You know, the Fox X-Men, which even X-Men 97 poked fun at with the black leather. Right. Like, give us their suits. Give us their looks and stuff. And we even got want to throw in here a tiny bit of John Hamm was talking about comic book movies, because he's been kind of talked about a lot. Sure. He said he passed on Green Lantern. He said he's more of a Marvel guy, so he's still trying to see about bringing him into the MCU. And I'm kind of torn between, like, either give me him or Keanu Reeves as Mr. Sinister. I think both of them would be really fun in that role.
I think so.
You bring that in, or, you know, really who you could get John Hamm playing. But that's kind of what I saw with that. But you've still got a lot of actors who are ready and willing to jump into the MCU, and X-Men is going to be one that you're going to have a lot of actors wanting to be a part of that, because it's, you know, once the X-Men are introduced, they're going to be a huge part of the MCU going forward.
You want to talk about job security, right? That's a good one. That's a good way to get it. But yeah, I'm excited because, like I said, they're going to do right by these. I'm very confident in that. It's just getting all the pieces in place and give us a story that's, that we're ready to dive into, and I'm here for all of it, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I can't wait to see what kind of cameos and stuff we get in Deadpool and Wolverine to get, a little taste of MCU X-Men there until we get the actual MCU X-Men.
The proper one. I'm ready for it, and we'll definitely keep people updated as more info about that comes across. But now I want to move into our TV review of the week. So now we're moving into episode 4 of Star Wars: The Acolyte. So last week was a little bit of, in our opinion, a bit of a step back for the show, a little bit, talking about the back history of the twins. This one I feel like is kind of moving at a similar pace that I wasn't necessarily thrilled with, to be honest, but it felt like a very slow-paced episode, and I'm not going to lie, like, with this episode, I was getting close to that feeling that I don't necessarily like to get from a show, and that I feel like it's losing my interest a little bit, and I hate to say that because I love Star Wars, but it's like the pacing of it didn't seem like it was moving forward for what is essentially the halfway point of this series, right? Yeah. So, or at least this season. Like, we're on the 4th episode of an 8-episode show, and the storyline hadn't really progressed too much, but in my opinion, what I really feel like saved the episode for me were probably the last 10 minutes or so of the episode, where we finally get a little bit more forward movement in, May's attempt to try to kill the Jedi, to, they're trying to figure out how to kill this Jedi without using a weapon. That's kind of the central theme for at least the back half of this episode. But I really feel like by the time we got to the end of it, it kind of got me back a little bit, especially particularly the last 2 minutes of the episode where it's like, okay, finally, this is something that we've been waiting for since the beginning, and we're finally getting it.
Yeah, I was a bit mixed on this episode as well, because I like stuff that has slow burns and stuff too, as long as you're, Shogun was a slow burn, but you had such great character development and story points and lines, but we're not really getting a whole lot of expansion on, these characters in the story. We're still kind of in the same, we got the Sith, we have the Acolyte, and we're still kind of got the same journey, but we're not getting a whole lot of depth of kind of why. Like, I think that's what the third episode was supposed to do, was give us a little more depth on why this is all happening. But we were left, I think, with more questions and answers after that. And yeah, this last several minutes were great and really sets up. Like, it feels like maybe they should expand it and give us a little bit more. How much? Or I hope we just don't kick off episode 5 and it just completely ignores and goes past that. And like, we only got like 30 seconds of a little bit of cool scene. And then, all right, we're just going to go back and do something else in episode 5. Like, I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes. It really got me into it. The third kind of took you out of it a little bit because you just kind of didn't care that much about what they told of, the twin story, because it just, there wasn't enough intriguing information. We kind of got back with, the Force making children, able to use the Force in that way, but we didn't really get, the motivations are still kind of unknown why May went so dark, and we kind of got a character turn in here with her because, this pretty much whole episode takes place on, I forget the name of the planet, but it is where Kaunaka, the Wookiee Jedi, is hiding out. And so, May with, what is it, Quamir, I forget how he pronounces his name now, are kind of journeying through the jungle to try to find him. And we get a little bit of back and forth that gives us more information. I think it also lends to more of a theory that probably everybody has had at this point of who the Masked Sith is with him. But we got some development, but then we get kind of out of left field that he's like, you know what, I'm going to trap him and I'm going to go turn myself in.
Right, and it's we have to acknowledge it at this point, right? So we're 4 episodes in. We're going to get into spoiler conversation, right? So I know we had talked a lot about wanting to see Kaunaka, a Wookiee Jedi, very intriguing. We hadn't really seen that yet, at least in the TV shows and the movies. So we were super intrigued by that. Well, spoiler alert, he's the Jedi that gets killed in this episode, but I don't think you could make it any more obvious that Khmer is the Sith, right? Because if they don't, I don't get it, and I don't understand why it would be anybody else. Just the way that it's shot. Does she leave him hanging because she trapped him too? Like you said, you get this character turn from May that she's like, okay, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe my connection with my sister is still strong enough that I want to join up with her and still do good, which is a little bit flimsy and a little bit convoluted as to why she's had a sudden change of heart when she seems to be so dedicated to this. And then all of a sudden, just because she finds out her sister is alive, she
was ready to kill her sister. Right, but now that she knows she's alive, like, I love her now.
It speaks to a little bit of the weakness in the writing that's kind of taken me out of it a little bit. And that's kind of what I mean by it's starting to lose me. It was starting to lose me a little bit, but the pacing does finally pick up when that Masked Sith shows up and takes on a whole line of Jedi, and with one force push of their hand just knocks back several Jedi, and that's where it leaves the episode off. And it's like, okay, finally we're getting a little bit of action, because there were so many cool things from the trailer that we really haven't seen yet, and it seems like it's going to be filled in the back half of the show.
Yeah, they saving all their action for one episode.
I hope not, but it could be. You just don't know. Like, the pacing of this show's been so off the entire time that I don't want to say that I hate the show, because that's a bit extreme, but it had started to lose me, like I said, until it kind of picked up towards the end. I'm like, all right, now we're moving forward. Because at the end of the day, Star Wars is about character development, but it's also got really good action tied to it too, and there hasn't been enough of that, in my opinion, for the type of show that I was expecting for this to be a little more action-driven, and it hasn't been yet.
Yeah, I agree, especially with all the trailers and everything that we were seeing. action and lightsabers and everything else, and like we've seen him pull them out, but we had past the introduction scene,
which was great.
And this episode, there just really hasn't been much action, which we just go and look at what we thought of Shogun. We don't have to have action and a ton of that. We love the slow burn of that show, but it gave us such great dialogue and character development stuff, which, the Acolyte just hasn't given us yet. Correct. It just feels like just for an 8-episode series, like we should have a little bit more by this point of the halfway point. And we do kind of get something to build off of going forward here with, the Sith letting himself be seen and known. But yeah, I did have a few issues with this episode with Kaunaka dying without ever seeing him battle, because it's a Wookiee Jedi. Let's see him do. All right, he steals a blaster and tears it in half, and he's walking around and he's sitting or he's working on something, and now he's dead without anything. Like, I wanted to see some Jedi Wookiee action there, and
that was disappointing.
This only lends it, because I'm trying to think in the trailer if we really saw him pull out his lightsaber and things. So maybe we have another flashback episode again where we'll see Kaunaka do some action there. But I had a lot of hope coming into this series. I don't think it's a bad series, but I think it's been a little lost for me. Like, my excitement has been dwindling down a little bit, and I also had a few issues with the Jedi going through the Force and stuff too, because it seemed like every time we cut back to them, it was just all of them walking through the forest, looking around, all in the same, like, almost Power Ranger. Like, how Power Rangers walk into the room and they're just like posing and they're doing these actions, and that's kind of what I felt like seeing the Jedi go around in the forest here. Every time they came to an opening, it's like, all right, let's look around. Okay.
Like, I don't want to nitpick too much, but if it almost feels like, I don't want to come off as ignorant to the history of who's directing these episodes or who's making them, but it almost feels like it's somebody who's written this that's never seen Star Wars before.
In ways, yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, the Jedi don't act like Jedi that we've seen before. You know what I mean? And in some of that direction they're getting, like you said, it feels a little bit over dramatized, over the top, like almost like a parody of a Jedi. Like almost, I hate to say it, but it almost feels like, what if SNL did a Jedi skit and this is how the Jedi act and how they move and how they talk? It feels a little bit like that, right? So it does a little bit, in my opinion anyway. But like you said, the pacing of the shows felt off. The character development, like you said, when the character development in the story is strong, we can forgive the lack of action. Like, it's not to say I need all action all the time, car crash, but if there's not that strong story to help support that, it does kind of take you out of it a little bit, and that's kind of how I'm feeling going into the back half of this show. The whole premise is about this girl trying to get revenge for the burning of her village, and we're halfway through, and there's 3 of the 4 Jedi are now dead. And she was hunting, and she's trying to turn good.
Yeah, because kind of going back into it, we're halfway through, and we haven't really progressed the story that much past the first 2 episodes, which I thought were really solid. And yeah, the 3rd episode showed that she, May was the one who killed everybody, but again, I wasn't a fan of how that happened, that she burned a metal and stone place down, but it also looked like the Coven wasn't killed by the fire. So it feels like we're going to get another flashback that show like the Jedi were a part of it, and that's kind of why they've kind of either given up or just not really fought back hard against May getting a revenge. But yeah, May has been a bit wishy-washy, because like we see her as a kid, like she's a little evil, but then she's not, but then she wants to kill her sister. Now she's out trying to kill Jedi. Well, now she wants to turn herself in because her sister's alive. Like, the motivations and just everything behind these characters, we're just not getting a lot of great character development, because we've got 3 of the 4 Jedi dead, and we haven't got much out of them. I mean, we had Tobin was just floating in the air. We get like one little line. We saw him pop up in episode 3 again, but we haven't got a lot to the main story that they're trying to tell. Like, what exactly are they trying to tell with this? Is it trying to paint the Jedi, showing how bad they are? If we're showing the rise of the Sith, it's been kind of which kind of matches very shadowy in the background, but at the same time, we're just not getting we're not getting enough forward movement with this show.
Agreed. And it's, like I said, it feels like since there are 3 of the 4 Jedi that are gone and you have this character movement with May, if it's going to shift a little bit for the back half of this series, like what's actually going to be where they move forward with this, right? Because I'll give them a little bit of credit. Like some of the shooting, like we've talked about, poked a little bit of fun at how like the Jedi portray themselves, but there were a couple shots in that episode that I thought were really good and really impactful. Like the very end where, you know, the masked Sith shows up and he just walks right up to Osha and like just pulls out the saber and is like very menacing and very intimidating. And they're all like, they're all kind of like a little bit frozen. Like, what is this that we're seeing? And then as soon as that red lightsaber comes out, just that shot was really cool and really like menacing for a minute. And I was like, okay, that was really neat. Like the framing of it was really good. And then like you kind of felt that a little, and that's why I said like it kind of pulled me back in a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's a little bit of hope here as far as where they're moving forward.
Yeah, and then how easily he just the scene of him, how easily he tossed all the Jedi away was really nicely done too.
Yeah, and that's where it literally kills the episode off right there, is them pushing the Jedi back, and it cuts to the end of the episode, and I'm like, all right, now we might have something here a little bit. Like let's see what we do to move forward. So there's a little bit of a glimmer of hope that, you know, they can kind of redeem themselves in the back half of the season, but there's a lot of work that they need to do, in my opinion, to kind of get this back on track a little bit.
Because even with the Star Wars universe, we had Andor that and Rogue One, both are, you know, highly praised series that kind of be a little bit more slow burn, have a little bit of action, but Andor, the series, was definitely a bit more of a slow burn. But
Absolutely.
We got a lot of development and we got a lot of interesting story and stuff. We just haven't got enough for me push with the story and development. And, you know, we are going back to a different era of the Jedi, and we're not seeing a whole lot of. We got a little bit of scenes with, I guess, in a Jedi temple or on a ship that we're getting to see a little bit more of the Jedi, but we're just not getting a whole lot into the Sith yet, but we're still not getting as much as maybe we expected or wanted to see of the Jedi of that day, because they are kind of acting differently, but not in a great way. Like if they're so powerful and popular and big and huge at this time, figured we'd be seeing a lot more depth and story with the Jedi, but it's kind of been a little thin.
A little sus. They're a little sus for sure, but there's only 4 more episodes to get through this season, so there's like, are we finally putting our foot to the floor and kind of like jumping forward with this story? Time will tell, right? That's kind of the fun of watching it episode by episode instead of binging the entire thing, is you can have a little bit of speculation here, like where are they going forward with this? Because there is opportunity for them to turn it around and really give us something really solid with the back half of this. And it's a little unfortunate that it's taken us 4 episodes to feel that way, but I'm curious to see where they go forward and how they move, because they did leave it on a bit of a high note to where it's like, oh, okay, now we might have something cooking, so let's see how they follow up. I'm very curious to see. Now, if it's a sharp cutoff again, I will come back next week, and I probably will not have very nice things to say, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now, right? So
pull me back in towards the end to get, all right, episode 5 now, we're going to start building and going, but yeah, so far, the first 4, the first half of the season, like, we're not going too deep into the story and everything else with it, but it's been kind of thin. Like when we talk about the twins and, going after to assassinate these Jedi, that's been the bulk of the story we got. We haven't got a whole lot of development with, we just know May and Osha were created by the Force by a coven. That's as deep as we've kind of gone so far. With the Jedi, we don't really have much depth with them either. So it's just, it's left us wanting more. It's not like I dislike the series. It's like the premise, I want more out of it. And we're just getting a thin layer instead of a deep, engrossing story, which we all kind of thought we were getting coming into it. And we hope the back half here definitely picks it up and gives us what we were kind of expecting going in.
Yeah, because the easy thing to do with this is to kind of compare it to the other super smash hit TV show that they've done, which is The Mandalorian. Mandalorian, in my opinion, does such a much better job at character development on what could be a little bit of a thinner premise, but they do such a good job of keeping that entertaining. And while also diving in and giving us a good mix of character development and action, right? And it feels like they're kind of missing the mark a little bit with this one, but they've got 4 episodes to get it right. So we'll see where they go moving forward.
Yeah, so the first 4 episodes of The Acolyte are available on Disney Plus. The next episode is out on Tuesday nights, I believe, when they drop now. We're hoping episode 5. Like 4 was a step up for me from 3, but it's still not kind of getting us back to where we kind of need to go for these final 4 episodes. Sure. So we're hoping episode 5 coming up really gets us back on track.
Agreed.
So moving into our film review of the week, we have The Bikeriders. So this is a Tom Hardy, Austin Butler, Jodie Comer period piece set in the 60s, 70s about a motorcycle gang. Yep. So we're kind of getting the ins and out of how this gang operates. But this film was definitely a bit different than I was expecting. Absolutely. It's kind of done, which just isn't that spoiler, but it's based off of a book of a guy photographer and journalist who actually went along with this gang for quite a while and did interviews during and after everything. So we kind of got it listed in a kind of documentary type of style. Like most of the movie was Jodie Comer. Like she was, you see her in the trailers and stuff, but you don't realize just she is at the core and the base of this film.
And in my opinion, she was absolutely fantastic in this.
Absolutely.
And she really, it's kind of being told in an interview style, like you said, documentary style of her perspective on this biker gang, right? So he's not really talking, he's talking to some of the other members of the biker gang throughout the movie, but it's really predominantly from Jodie Comer's perspective on like what's happening and what's going on. But like you said, this takes place in the late 60s, early 70s of this motorcycle gang based out of Chicago called the Vandals. Mm-hmm. And they, it's formed by Tom Hardy through some he gets inspired by seeing a Marlon Brando film and decides he wants to be a biker. And it kind of starts off as, this racing club that's not really, moving into anything super serious. It's just more out of fun. And then as it grows in popularity, they start to lean more into, acting more like a stereotypical quote unquote biker gang of, getting involved with, violence and, things like that. And it was a good mix of I was surprised at how humorous it was too, because it didn't feel like it was going to be that funny of a film, but it had some really funny moments in it too. But one of the things I really appreciated about the film itself was it had moments of violence that were really impactful when they went violent, because I know you and I particularly cringed at a scene with Austin Butler where he gets attacked in a bar and there's a fallout from that, and he gets, spoiler alert, it's a little graphic, he gets attacked in the foot and the ankle by a shovel. And use your imagination. I'm not going to be that descriptive of what happened, but it was intense, and we were both like, oh my God, that was nuts. But it was just violent enough that it wasn't like gratuitous violence. It was done in a pretty tasteful way. Like it wasn't like super gory or bloody or anything, but it played a role in it. And I really was impressed with the balance of humor and seriousness that they were able to walk for this.
Yeah, I was surprised at just how much humor it had into it, whether it was meant to be that humorous, which it felt like, because I mean, there's one particular scene where another biker gang shows up and they're kind of saying, well, you scratched my bike. I just looked at your bike, and they're just talking. And then Austin Butler's character is told like, hey, your boys are up there. He just looks at him. He runs up and does a flying fist right into it. They weren't fighting or anything. He just comes out of nowhere and just starts throwing haymakers. Like it was funny, but then you got into like the grittiness of the fight and everything else. Then you have, someone who got injured pretty good, or he got injured pretty good, and they're all like, all right, let's stop and let's go have a beer.
As reckless as he is, I want a Benny to have my back in any type of situation like that, where he's just like, oh, my friends are in trouble, say less. I'm going to go run and just punch this dude without any context. Like, it was fun, but yeah, Austin Butler did a really good job in this film. He didn't have a ton of lines in it. Like you said, it's kind of really told from Jodie Comer's perspective, but Austin Butler didn't have a ton of dialogue in it. And Tom Hardy had a little bit more, but you said this was so told from from her perspective that it felt like she was really the star of the movie.
Oh yeah, she definitely was, and she was fan. And being an English actress to pull off that accent, that attitude and sass and the look, like she was so fantastic in the movie. This in the end, it was her movie.
It was. It really
and
was.
like Austin Butler was great, but I felt his character, and I know it's based off of a true story and stuff, but it did feel like he was kind of thin. Like his character didn't have a whole lot of motivation or depth to him. He's just a guy that doesn't like to have any responsibilities and wants to ride. Like that's basically Benny. That's it. That's him.
Yeah.
So it was kind of thin, but Austin, he played the cool.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even like we go back to the humor, but it was like he drops when he first meets Jodie Comer's character. They're in the bar. What was Kathy? Was her character's name?
Yeah, Kathy.
But meets her in the bar, and he just instantly comes over and sits and just stares at her. And then she says she wants to leave, but he's like, all right. And he walks away, but then he goes, sits on his bike, and she ends up riding along with him, and he drops her off at home. But instead of leaving, he just turns around and sits on his bike for like 17 hours staring at the house.
Yeah, it's a really funny, but he's just looking as cool as can be, just like smoking one cigarette after another and just kind of staring at the house. And she's in a relationship at this point. One, I don't know what she was doing in that bar other than trying to support her friend at that point, going to see her friend, but it winds up causing her boyfriend to leave and like all this stuff. And then they wind up, the running joke was I married him 5 weeks later. Like it's hilarious, but
I knew it was true to that era, but man, probably 20, 30,000 cigarettes smoked in this movie. It felt like there was just nobody who was on screen that didn't have a cigarette in their hand or their mouth. Like it was...
And Tom Hardy literally talking through half the film with a cigarette in his mouth, lit or unlit. It was pretty funny. Tom Hardy, man, he plays some of these roles just so well. Like he does a lot of emoting without really saying a whole lot when he doesn't need to, but when he does speak, it does kind of carry some heft to it. And I think he really did a good job as the leader of this biker gang who, once it got to a certain point, he was looking for a way out because he really was a family man who, like, kind of saw what the group was becoming and was trying to get out and was trying to hand it off to Benny. But like you said, Benny wanted absolutely nothing to do with any type of leadership or responsibility. So he was kind of like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to handle this, club at the rate that it's growing. So it was a fun dynamic, and just to kind of see how everything played out in a way that had a little bit of a shock to it, I think, with like some of the fates of some of the characters, and it was a really cool take on an old school biker gang, I think.
Yeah, I enjoyed the movie overall. It had a few issues,
Sure.
just kind of like past Jodie Comer's character, past the wife, past her, like everyone kind of felt a little thin, like
Sure.
because it's from her perspective, so
Right.
she's giving her kind of view of who these guys were, but you're not fully getting a depth of exactly why did they continue this biker gang on for as long as they did, and it went. And I also feel like the trailers for it was slightly deceiving in a way that they're talking about just what the gang truly is, which we got there at the very end, but it wasn't the main group, and it wasn't the main kind of story of the film. So there was felt like that was trying to hype it up to be a little bit more than it actually was when it came to the violence and drugs and all this other stuff. That it was there, but it wasn't like why the gang existed or a main thing behind it. But there were some really good, powerful scenes in it and things. But I know I laughed to you about it, and I've got to bring it up about Brucey because it's nothing against the actor, but
Sure.
with that kind of swept pompadour type of hairstyle and just his look and his build, I couldn't stop seeing Conan O'Brien as
100%,
Brucey.
yeah.
And it wasn't, but I couldn't stop seeing it. So that took me out of the movie just a little bit because of my own mind could not stop telling me, what is Conan O'Brien doing in this? But the actor played it well, even though kind of you didn't get a whole lot of depth with him either. But like I said, this film overall was Jodie Comer. Like, she was just so much dialogue, so much of the movie, and she was fantastic with the sass and the attitude and
Absolutely.
everything she did. Like, she was just so good. Like, Tom Hardy and Austin Butler, everybody was really good in it, but she really carried this movie.
I think for those of you that are kind of on the fence as to whether or not you're going to go see the film, if you go in knowing that it's a story being told from one character's perspective, giving an interview as kind of the basis for the entire story, I think it'll kind of change how you feel about the film a little bit, and that could be either a good or a bad thing, right? Because you kind of go in expecting like it's this narrative story about all of these characters that you're going to get a lot of depth and development to, but the actual story is being told from one woman's perspective, the wife of a secondhand member of the group. So it's not like it's coming from Tom Hardy's wife's perspective. It's coming from Austin Butler's wife's perspective. And so the opportunity for depth to these characters, you just don't know, because the character herself doesn't really know, because she gets asked a lot, well, why is it like this? Why is it like, and she's kind of just like, I don't really know. Like, she's like, I don't understand. It's just how it was. And that's how it is. And I think the writing from that, if you can kind of just take a step back and look at it that way, I think it's kind of smart writing, because like she's not really expected to know everybody's motivations, really. So you don't get the opportunity to dive into that because of how the story's being framed, which is why I think, to your point, the trailers are a little bit deceptive, because it doesn't really tell you that it's really like a documentary style film being told from one character's perspective.
Yeah, so that's why I said it was kind of felt a little deceptive on how they showed things, because they showed it's more of they're drug running and they're doing all this, and it's this type of film, but it's more of an interview documentary type of film broken up, because we'll get scenes from this year and then we'll go back to another year and then we go here, and so it's kind of broken up in different pieces. It flows together well, but it is definitely not kind of exactly what I felt that they were advertising. But it was a solid film overall. It's great performances and stuff, but I do believe you need to go in kind of knowing it is kind of a more of an interview documentary style type of film that kind of breaks up and chops up our story based on what her character knows and saw and experienced. And I say, yeah, she was so fantastic in it. Absolutely. And Tom Hardy, as you mentioned, he gives us all into every role. Like, he tries to disappear into it. He's saw an interview talking about trying to get his Midwest kind of accent. And if he did it well, and it's definitely another different voice that he's given. But yeah, you see the nuances of he could just kind of give a little eye roll or a head tilt, and you knew exactly what he was thinking, or going about and seeing the annoyance on his face and everything else because you'll get often through the movies that there's different people who are wanting to join in and all that, and we even get a cameo of somebody that it was briefly shown in one of the trailers. I don't want to spoil if you don't know it, but it's a motorcycle movie. This guy was going to show up.
Of course.
And it was fun, but it was also, I mean, I guess it could have been important to the story, but he wasn't exactly important to the story, other than, one scene that involved Jodie Comer's character. Like, we didn't really know what his motivations were with this red dress and other stuff. Like, did they know what was going to happen? Would they plan all this? Because we do, towards the end of the movie, get kind of a spiral of things are getting let out of control. They're getting too big. They got chapters all over the Midwest and stuff. And as we mentioned, a good few scenes were filmed in Cincinnati, so we got to try to pick out, okay, that was probably Cincinnati. Oh, I know that's Cincinnati.
Absolutely.
And seeing that, but I was surprised we didn't see. But again, it's based off a true story. I was expecting maybe we get a Cincinnati chapter or something else, but I think we got like Milwaukee, and of course Chicago's the main one, and we got a few others. But there was kind of a stacked cast as well throughout this movie, and they all did their job well. It just, in the end, you kind of need to know what kind of style movie it is, and I think you will get more enjoyment going in knowing that it's an interview documentary style film.
Sure. And for the record, I do want to say, like, as a side piece, the debate, if you're from Cincinnati or if you're not, is the Cincinnati chili debate. Like, you're either a fan of it or you're not if you're not from here. Austin Butler, Cincinnati chili fan. So that's always
And if you're not a fan of it, you're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Sponsorships, please. But no, all kidding aside, it was fun to kind of pick out those. I know I talked to you about a drive-in style restaurant that was a part of it that I enjoyed, that I've been to a few times, and it was fun just to kind of have that little bit of home. And you're like, okay, is this, like you said, is this part of Cincinnati? Like, oh, I know that's definitely. I've actually been to that street where they shot that, and we had followed the film close enough to we know some of the areas around here that they were filming, and then some of the more outskirt parts of the cities, you kind of get into that open space between like Cincinnati and Columbus, where it's a lot more open road. More, if you're shooting an older style film, that really does, because it does feel like you're kind of going back in time a little bit when you get on the highway between like Cincinnati and Columbus. There's a nice stretch of land that's just, we jokingly say, if you look out to the left side of the car, you see corn, and if you look out to the right side of the car, you'll see more corn, or just a big open field. But it does kind of lend itself visually to that time period of filming, and it's really cool to see, that this area of the country get a little bit more of, an opportunity to kind of shine in these types of films, and hopefully, more stuff gets shot there.
And bringing up the long open cornfields made me think of the scene in the movie where, Austin Butler is just being whatever he wants to do. So he's running from the cops and he's running through all the stoplights, and he ends up out in the middle of nowhere, and he runs out of gas, and it's like, there's the massive endless fields of nothing, which it was a good movie and a good ride overall. Like I said, I think a little mentality change going into it will kind of help your enjoyment of it if you know it's that type of movie going in, because the trailers showed a decent amount of the movie, but it painted it in a different way than I felt like the movie kind of was in the end. But there's good performances all throughout. I mean, I said, again, Jodie Comer, she stole the show. Her accent, her sass, her attitude, everything was just spot on for that character, and she did such a great job in there. But it is kind of a little darker story and tale in there at times. So you got fun and humor and other stuff, but it does get a little dark. But I did want to touch on, before we wrap up here, because of the time period, it was in the 60s, 70s, I thought it did a good job of showing kind of men of that era. Agreed. Because they talked about a lot about, and she did it a couple times in their interview, saying, I really don't see Benny cry. Like, I don't see him cry.
Sure.
It went to a funeral. There was no tears from any of the biker gang. Like, none of them are crying, but it took certain aspects and certain things to happen to get him to cry. And that felt close to home, because I know my dad was kind of that way at first. And so he started losing some of his brothers and all that, and then I started seeing the emotion. But he grew up in that kind of household from the 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s, of that men don't show emotion. You're not supposed to show how you feel. And, I felt that through these characters. Like, I witnessed that as well. And, like, it's an unfortunate way that they showed it, because then, of course, now we're trying to make sure men and everybody else open up more and show that we do have struggles and we have emotions and we have issues and problems. But it painted the guys exactly kind of how they were in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I agree. I think they did a good job of that as well. And there's also a little bit of a trigger warning for, you talk about the red dress scene in particular. There's a little bit of a triggering thing there for a little bit of, I want to say assault without using the other word for it. Spoiler, I'll spoil a little bit for it. It doesn't actually happen, but the threat of it is real enough to where it could trigger some people. Just kind of know that going in a little bit.
Yeah, I was sitting there like...
Yeah, we're like, are they actually going to follow through with it? They don't, but it's serious enough to where it's like, okay, if you've gone through something like that, it could be a little bit of a triggering traumatic experience as well. I kind of wanted to shine a little bit of a light on that if you go to see that too, just to kind of expect that too. But like you said, really well done, really well acted. If you shift your perspective, knowing that it's not a narrative type story over like an overall narrative, but more from a narrative from one person's perspective, I think you'll view the film a little bit differently. So if you see that, if you know that going in, I think you'll really enjoy this film. We really liked it too. And once we got into the film and knowing, okay, this is what it's actually going to be about, I think we really enjoyed it after that.
Yeah, and stay for the first part of the credits as well, because some of the photographs that the photographer actually took of the actual, biker gang members are shown at the beginning. So I kind of sat there and I was intrigued to see just kind of how close, because they don't always match up very well. Like going back to the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, when we saw, of course, you have monstrous men playing these, and they show the pictures of who they're playing, and they're small little guys and stuff. They matched up pretty well here in the Bikeriders from what they showed in the pictures and stuff. And Tom Hardy and Austin Butler were great, but yeah, this was a Jodie Comer movie.
She's absolutely fantastic. She chews every scene she's in. She's so I see. This film really shows off why she's growing in popularity as kind of like a top of the card actress that she is. She is so good in this. Like I agree. Like she was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, she's definitely one that if I see she's attached to a movie,
Absolutely.
I'm like, all right, I'm going to go see that.
For sure. She's amazing.
So the Bikeriders is in theaters right now. Go check it out. Again, if it's cost or something else keeping you from going to theaters, check your local chain and see when they have their cheaper days, normally Tuesday or Wednesdays. But I think it's a fun movie to go check out. It's something different and interesting past kind of what we've been seeing from a lot of movies, especially a lot of movies. Some are over the top, big action blockbusters. Is a little more grounded period piece that is worth checking out.
Agreed.
All right, so moving into what's coming up this week. So we have A Quiet Place Day 1 coming out. So it's this prequel to the other 2 Quiet Place movies. We're looking forward to checking that one out.
Can't wait.
And then we also have Kevin Costner's Horizon American Saga Chapter 1. So this is a 3-hour plus Western epic that we've talked about a few times on the podcast here. He's had to pour some of his money in to get this made, and it's one that's been near and dear to his heart, and also kind of caused the rift and split that's making him not return to Yellowstone for the final few episodes. But I'm looking forward to check that out. I don't know if I'll get a chance to see it in theaters, but I think the second chapter comes out later this month.
Yeah, I believe the first episode,
Or not this month, sorry,
the first
later
chapter,
this year.
the first chapter comes out this week. I think by the end of August, I think is the other chapter.
Something like
I can't remember.
September.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting release schedule for that. But like you said, he put a lot of his own money into it. This was a passion project of his, and like you said, it caused a little bit of a rift with Yellowstone. But early tracking on that, not to veer away too much from it, it appears that he may be possibly changing course on Yellowstone a little bit, and maybe interested in doing more, depending on how well this film does. But
the last I heard, he kind of gave a final notice that he's not returning for these final episodes. That was just a day or two ago.
Okay, so it looks like he finally made a decision, because there was some waffling that he was like,
there was back
some
and
early
forth.
rumblings like he was not, like it wasn't tracking as well as he thought it would, and he may come back. But
And I don't know if it was fully his choice either that he's not returning,
sure.
because it seemed like there's a rift that happened between him and the producer of the show, because he was needing time to do, this epic, 2-chapter, 6+ hour movie.
Sure.
But yeah, I still haven't checked out all of Yellowstone. I've seen the first season, I believe, but
So good.
But yeah, hopefully it was worth it. I guess, I mean, we've talked about it before. There's 2 things Kevin Costner does really well, which is baseball movies and Westerns.
Sure.
Like Open Range, I really loved and enjoyed that Western he did. And I'm looking forward to seeing it, but it's also being a dad and everything else. Do I have 3+ hours to be able to sit in a theater to watch? And I'm curious to see how audiences react to that as well, to be able to go in and see a movie that's on. But I mean, Oppenheimer did, gangbusters at 3 hours, but
Avengers.
don't know if, this is going to register as big as he's probably hoping it does, because like Dances with Wolves and everything else were major hits for him. We'll see how a Western does in 2024.
Yeah, does he have the star power to create another hit? Time will tell, right?
Yeah. Moving on to streaming releases, so we have a Zac Efron, Nicole Kidman movie, A Family Affair, on Netflix. That'll be out on June 28th. So it kind of looks interesting, where it looks like Zac is a movie star who ends up with a mom of, played by Nicole Kidman, of a fan or of his girlfriend. I haven't looked I've watched a trailer, but I haven't looked a whole lot in details. It looks like it could be fun. So you can check that out on streaming. But on demand, we have a pretty big on-demand release schedule this week. Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, and The Boy and the Heron will be out on June 25th. So, of course, polar opposite films there, but 2 big movies that I haven't seen The Boy and the Heron yet. I mean, looking forward to checking that one out. But I hope, as we just talked about not too long ago, that Furiosa sees a good run with streaming, and that is popular as it comes out on demand here.
Absolutely, and it hopes it does well. Boy and the Heron is absolutely fantastic as well. It's another Miyazaki anime film. It did upset our pick for best animated movie at the Oscars. It is an Oscar-winning film. It did win for best animated feature. So if you haven't seen it yet, if you like the Miyazaki the anime films, this is the latest one. It is fantastic, and I think you really like it as well.
And going a completely different direction, we have what was an interesting horror film that I do want to check out. We didn't get a chance to see in theaters. It didn't have a very long run, which was In a Violent Nature. So that's out on June 28th. So this was a horror film that follows the killer. Like, you're seeing it from the killer's perspective all throughout the film, and it looked, and from what I've heard about it, very dark, gritty, gory, kind of crazy horror movie that has, that kind of interesting, intriguing aspect to it, that it's following like third person behind the killer the whole time. So I really do want to check that one out.
Yeah, the premise of it sounds really neat. I've heard mixed things about it, but I'm excited that it's coming on demand and eventually making its way to streaming, and it's definitely one that I plan to watch as well.
Yeah, and a series that I've been waiting for to come back here, and Josh is now caught up on it. The Bear Season 3 premieres on FX and Hulu on June 27th. If you haven't watched The Bear at all, go watch the first 2 seasons. Check out the third. It's a fantastic show. It's done so well. It's got drama. It's got humor. It's just, it's such a well-rounded show.
Yeah, I just finished it the other day, and I can't say good enough things about it. Jeremy Allen White is fantastic. Ayo Edebari is amazing in it as well. The cast is so good. John Bernthal, spoiler, plays the deceased brother that's the original owner of the restaurant, who leaves it to Jeremy Allen White. But very happy to see season 3 dropping this week. I'm glad I'm finally caught up in time for the new season. I believe they drop all the episodes at the same time for this, or is it a weekly release?
Yeah, honestly, I can't remember, because I kind of got into it. The second season was going on, so I went back and kind of binged, so I had everything available, but I didn't look to see if it's dropping all at once, or if it's, with it being on FX, I would assume it's weekly, but they could be dropping it all.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, looking at it, I watched it on Disney Plus, which has the Hulu bundled with it as well, but if you go and look at the release dates of all the episodes, it had the same dates. I'm curious if all the episodes are coming out at the same time, and they may do like a weekly episodic on TV, like on FX, maybe do a weekly TV, like a TV drop, but if you watch it on streaming, you can watch them all. I'm not entirely sure about it.
I mean, I'm ready to binge if it is.
Let's do it. They're 30-minute episodes, so they're very easy to watch and catch up on. And it's only 18 episodes for the first 2 seasons, so if you want to watch it and get caught up, it's very easy to binge and watch. I'd watched both seasons within 2 weeks. It was pretty quick for me to catch up on it, and very excited for that.
Yeah, great series, and season 4 was being shot back to back with it, so we shouldn't be waiting long after season 3 here to get season 4. And it's a fantastic show and well worth the time to check out. Even though we're loaded with shows to see, because we've got The Boys and we have House of the Dragon and The Acolyte, and there's a lot going on here in June.
So that'll do it. We're 25 episodes in. That's crazy. We've had a fun run so far, but can't thank you enough for all your continued support. Please check us out anywhere you can find your podcast audio-wise. Check us out here on YouTube. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all those things that you do on the YouTube videos. We'd love to see you in our Discord. We'd love to talk to you about any TV shows you're watching or any films as well. But coming up next week, we will be reviewing Episode 5 of Star Wars: The Acolyte. We will also be giving our review of A Quiet Place Day 1. Very much looking forward to that film as well. So until next time, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we will see you next week.